What's up, y'all? It's Shuffle, and today we're going to be talking about how to build mark teams. I think the only other archetype that I need to cover in this series are dodge teams, and I'll get to that in the next week or two, hopefully. We'll see. But otherwise, I recorded this video last night, and I wasn't too happy with it. I rambled a bit more than usual, and I'm going to include some footage from it. So you're going to see like the light change because I recorded that at night, but it's still relevant and it's helpful, and I want to keep that footage. That specific thing, but otherwise, for mark teams, we'll talk about the idea behind making them, how to make them, how to play them, and then give you like an example battle to show what it looks like in action. So with mark teams in general, there is I guess I should have did this first, but there is a specific one that most people probably gravitate towards when they first start trying to learn this, and that is, I'm trying to get to Jester as well, whatever. This is Mark for Death. And so this team is probably most people's first exposure to Mark, and this team is fine. As a team, you'd run different abilities because of the ranks and stuff like that, but this team is fine. The issue with this team specifically is it's very slow in terms of like overall speed. Like Bounty Hunter and Houndmaster at 7 speed is pretty not great. Arbalest at 5 base speed, this is below average. I think 7's about the average. And then occultist is like 1 point over average at 8. So this team, it functions, it'll win and stuff, but I don't think this is like the best example for learning these teams. So otherwise, what I do like to suggest is something that I believe is either Thick or Midnight came up with first. I can't remember, I always forget this part, but this is a Jester mark team, and this team is really, really powerful. And the main reason it is so good is because it fixes the inherent issue that most mark teams have in the fact that they're too slow. So with Jester, you have Battle Ballad, which is like the best skill in the game. In my opinion, you could say it's a different skill like Divine Comfort and something like that. I wouldn't argue with you, but I think Ballad is the best button in the entire game because it gives your team, basically like 3 extra trinkets, and this thing can be spammed. So with Jester, it gives the entire team a bit more accuracy to hit evasive targets. It gives them more speed to run over the team in turns 2 and 3, which is usually when this team should be cleaning up fights. And then also you get more crit, which helps you get through bigger targets faster. And then we have occultist up front who can stun, mark, heal, and stab, which is great. And just to show you some stuff like Steady Bracer, this is like the extra accuracy is just to help you land the stuns and the marks on the evasive targets. Bounty Hunter with some crit and stun and a mark as well. And then Arbalest with damage and support. But otherwise, with this team, or with most mark teams, I should say in general, you're trying to have usually 1 or 2 characters that can set up, and then 1 or 2 characters that can exploit the damage. You don't need all 4 of them to be able to do it like Mark for Death. I guess, yeah, Occultist doesn't exploit it, but he does set it up. So, this is also why we don't run Sniper's Mark. It's because Arbalest is too slow to set other people up, and then also she can't target rank 1 with it, which is why it's not a great ability. And the way to think about Mark is really just damage projection. So Mark, like Mark for Death or Target Whistle and stuff like that, it's just characters saying, I can't do great damage to this target, so I'm going to help someone else who can do that damage. So for example, Bounty Hunter can't do big damage to rank 4. He has Come Hither and Caltrops for like utility and stuff, and Flashbang. And those are all pretty cool, but he can't hit them with his really strong attacks, right? So instead you're saying, I'm going to bump up Arbalest damage with Mark for Death on rank 4 and kind of trade damage that way. So it's usually more damage to mark something than it is to just double tap stuff. That's kind of one of the first things people think about is like, well, I can just double tap it. And I was in that school of thought for a while as well, but it's usually better to mark high priority targets. But otherwise, most of the mark teams I'm going to suggest only have a couple people that can set it up and like 2 people usually max that can exploit it. You don't need the full team doing this thing. But otherwise, the other ways to consider when you're building this is you have a couple people that can do the strategy, and then you have support units. So Jester is not a mark character, right? Jester is just a support unit, but he supports everyone else doing mark. And then that's why you can also run things like Occultist, who not only sets it up, but he's a fantastic support unit. And also Vestal. I have an example of like a Vestal in a team like this, and it's suboptimal, but it is fun, and it's just more of a way to get you thinking about how to build these teams. So with that in mind, the way to play these, and I'll show this in the example battle that we're going to do in this video, is you don't have to mark every single enemy on every single turn. That's actually a loss of something that I use like this term a lot, is tempo. It's like you don't really lose too much by marking, but otherwise it's still better to understand when it's appropriate to mark and when it's not. So really fragile enemies that you have no trouble hitting, like maybe Bone Courtier or something, if you have enough accuracy to where it's not an issue, if you can one tap that enemy most of the time, you don't need to mark it. The time you're supposed to mark enemies is when they're gonna hang around for more than like 2 turns. So the elite enemies like Squiffy Ghast, Swine Skyver, for example, or size 2 enemies like Unclean Giant and what's another one? Bone General, right? Swinotar, those things. So big size 2 enemies that take a while to kill, those are your mark targets, and bosses. So that's when you bust out mark. Otherwise, you can still run a team like this and then just have like your stuns go off on turn 1 and then have arbalest like double tap a Spitter Pig or something like that. You don't need to mark until it's like a really big target that needs like 3 hits to go down. That's usually an okay rule of thumb to consider with that. So that in mind, I'm just going to show you this example here instead of like Mark for Death. I like the Jester Mark team. I think this is a really good one to just learn how to play Mark comps, because it kind of fixes the inherent issue, but also makes characters play in ways that most new players probably aren't comfortable with at first. So like putting occultist up front, he has Hands from the Abyss, which is like one of the best stuns in the entire game. And so you have him up front. Most people don't usually do that. And then arbalest gets to play kind of this hybrid support role that I was talking about before. So the way I usually talk about playing arbalest for most intents and purposes is she shoots with like sniper's mark or sniper shot on turns like 1 and 2. Sometimes you use suppressing fire depending on what the enemy backline is. It's kind of a case-by-case basis. But after she runs out of rank 4 and 3 targets, usually she swaps to healing for the last couple turns. So like turns 3, 4, and 5, sometimes 4 and 5, is when she's just throwing out heals. And most arbalest teams function pretty well with that in mind. And the same kind of goes inversely for the other characters. So like turns 1 and 2, characters like occultist and bounty hunter and jester are going to be setting up with like ballad, marks, stun, for example, or heal if you need to. And then they swap the other way for the final turns, where they go back to doing damage, maybe stun lock a pretty important target like a bone general that's still hanging around, or start doing damage, or start stress healing, right? So their roles kind of swap as the battle goes on. So for team building mark teams, something really important to know is speed differential. So you really need to make sure that the characters that are going first or that need to go first have the ability to do that. So something like Jester with a bunch of extra speed to get ballad out as quickly as possible, and then making sure your characters like occultists, who are going to be setting up arbalest for instance, are a few points faster. Ideally you want 3 to 4 or 5 points faster, but 2's enough. 2 isn't totally consistent. 3 and 4 is when it starts getting very consistent, but do the best you can. And if you need to, you can run things that boost speed, like Speed Stone, for example, that I have on this Jester, or Feather Crystal, or you can swap in trinkets that lower your speed, like Legendary Bracers. So these are really interesting ways to, like I said, team build. It teaches you a lot of things that you may not understand at first, like how important it is to dictate speed orders. But you can also be pretty creative with things like heavy boots. So if you need to lower your speed a lot, you can just throw these on instead. But those are some examples there. And I think we'll show off a couple example teams put together, and then I'll do the example battle. This is an example of a more unconventional mark team that I was talking about, but it kind of follows the idea of what I was talking about with the Jester Mark one, where it kind of teaches you how to play characters differently. This is another one that emphasizes arbalest shooting for like turns 1 and 2, and then healing for the rest of the fight. Because we have, again, look, we have only 2 characters that can do the mark strategy, right? We have one person that can mark. Hopefully they're fast enough to go before arbalest. I'd probably have to manipulate these speeds, like give her bracer and give him like Feather Crystal, right? Just to change it by a lot. But otherwise, we have one character that can mark, we have one character that can do mark damage, and that is honestly enough for a team like this. But if you want to try some fun stuff too, we have Vestal, who has some supporty stuff with stunning and group healing, which is her best ability, so she doesn't really miss losing the single heal too much, and then Hand of Light just to, you know, give her some extra damage if she needs it, and, you know, Mace Bash. And so we have also Hellion, who has a lot of reach. She can help arbalest clean up kills that get away to, like, you know, 5 HP or something like that, and also do pretty big damage to frontliners and stun. So if you notice, kind of like the damage over time team that I talked about, or that video, we have a lot of stuns too to help control things while we're selectively killing what we need to with our mark damage. Our final team example may not look like a mark team on paper, and you need the Crimson Court DLC to get Flagellant, so you can kind of replace this with something else, but it doesn't function as well without Flagellant, just because Plague Doctor and Flagellant together is arguably one of the best pairs in the entire game. So I like these two together a lot. But this is a control team that has really good mark synergy for blowing up big targets. So with a team like this, we have Rain of Sorrows and Blinding Gas Plague Grenade. This is to really wear down backline enemies. This doesn't really work in the ruins, but this works pretty much everywhere else. Just because Plague Doctor can get her Blight chance high enough to where she can still punch through Blight resistant enemies. But with a team like this, the same ideas apply, right? We have a lot of control through stuns. We can wear down our backline targets, and then the size 2s or the really threatening elite enemies like Skyver and Virago that show up, we have answers to them. So we have Target Whistle, we have another stun, guard, you know, these are really good utility moves. We have the ability to just completely shred someone's protection through Target Whistle and Mark for Death. And then we have big damage that we can turn on whenever we need to. So I like this team a lot. And like I said, this doesn't really seem like a marked team on paper. And it kind of isn't. It's like more of a hybrid type of team. But with that being said, it really shows you how Mark can just be kind of slotted into most things. And you don't have to like dedicate 4 characters to it, right? So you have, like I said, the control elements, you have some supplemental healing, and you have other healing from Plague Doctor, for example. And then when you really need to turn on the damage, you have it. So I like this team a lot, as just for many purposes, but it's really flexible in terms of what you can do, depending on if you just want to switch around some of the abilities. And so now I'm going to do the example battle that I recorded last night, and I'll walk you through that one. Okay, I'm really happy I didn't have to go too far into this dungeon. Like, I picked a long mission just in case, and I picked probably the best team to show for this. But I didn't have to go too far to find a Swinotar or a Skyver, so I'm very happy about this. Skyver, even though it's not a size 2, which is usually one of the things you want to hit with Mark, it is a very just beefy enemy in terms of HP and stuff like that, so it is a great candidate to get marked and shot. So this isn't a full team of enemies, but this does exemplify what we're looking for. So we happen to go first. We have a 13 speed Jester, so we're going to battle on turn 1. We're going to take some damage here as we set up. We might be able to go first. Nice. Okay, so we're not marking yet, as you notice, right? We're going to try and stun with occultist because his turn came up. We should get this. Yeah, okay. And then let's see, we could mark this turn. Yeah, so this is really beneficial because it gives Bounty Hunter a lot of speed for next turn to do some more damage to like the front 2 stuff, but also Skyver has a bit of protection, right? He has about 15, and we're going to take this off hopefully if the mark sticks, because this takes away 20 prod. If it doesn't stick, that's actually okay though. Okay, we didn't get the debuff, but that's fine. And so now here, since we have a lot of damage on Arb, she has 46 crit because of the boost to Sniper Shot, and our trinkets, we have some high level stuff just because the Warrens does not play around. So that's why we're showing off a little bit. But also, look at this, 14 to 28 chances to crit, pretty good. Okay, rolled pretty high. So Skyver's stunned for its turn, and you know, we're gonna take a little damage here, but we're also much faster than the enemy for next turn. Like, the only person that probably won't go before Skyver is Arb, but she's still got 11 compared to Skyver's 9. And so we're really trying to focus on this thing. Skyver is the most dangerous enemy. And even though we have a very high likelihood of, excuse me, Arb cleaning this up this turn, we do need to chip away at this thing just a little bit more. So we're gonna do a little damage here. And then with Jester, if we really wanted to make sure we could get this down, we could use, what is it, slice off here and do a little damage, get a little damage over time, but I think Arb will clean this up. So I'm gonna go over here and hit this. Nice, we got the blade. So our speed did help here, and then we got it, right? So that's Skyver going down, even though Skyver is a very dangerous and tough enemy. And so here's the other thing too. We have control elements with our ability to stun. Most people might heal here because we're like half HP, but we're actually going to prevent more damage by stunning. So we're going to stun this thing first. And this is actually dead to damage over time, so we're counting our damage right now. So we're kind of doing two things at the same time. Taking a little damage here. Blade's okay. But see, since this thing is dead, this is what I was talking about before. Since this thing is dead, to damage over time, I'm going to use Arb's turn to heal. I'm also going to stall a little bit here too. Like, I could Dirk Stab. Dirk Stab is actually not a bad thing to do, but let's get some stress healing. This is like just super hyper min-max right now. And we're going to stun with occultist. Same reason as before. We prevent more damage than we'd probably heal. So we're going to do that. We lowered our torch, so we're going to torch up here. We also have finish him. Clean it up, right? So we get some synergy. Hopefully Arb goes before this thing. Nice, she did. We get some healing. So that is, you know, kind of some textbook right there. We're gonna take a little bit of damage from the blights and stuff, which we could cure them if we needed to, but I hope that kind of exemplifies what I was trying to talk about. So we don't need everyone marking every turn. Like you saw, we only marked one target, right? We didn't mark all three of them that appeared. We had ways to do damage to everything, and we really understood the pace of combat. Like, I made it so my Jester had the best chance of going first. I knew these two would go before Arb, and then Arb could start shooting. So that's how you kind of want to set up your teams if you can help it. And then we didn't really need to heal until the end with Arb, as I was saying before, because once she runs out of targets is when she starts healing. Alright, that's going to do it for this one. I hope that it was informative. I hope that you learned something. And I'll cover dodge teams at some point, hopefully in the next couple weeks, alongside the other content that I'm working on. I'm trying to kind of revamp some stuff, so I'm working on other stuff that is taking more time than normal. So I apologize for the slowdown in quality, not like Twitch VOD content lately. But otherwise, that's it for this one. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.